25R S0075. It's the governor's budget. Second by Senator Fagg. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. At this time, I'd like to recognize Senator Larry Alley. He has some special guests here today. Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two guests here from, or actually three guests here from Ark City, Kansas, or Kansas City, Kansas, some of you. They are juniors in high school, and it would be Kennedy Barnes and Genevieve Herrera, and then their teacher, which is Sarah O'Donnell. If you would just wave or hand wave, we appreciate you being here today. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next, we'll have an update on the broadband expenditures. We'll have Rachel Willis, Director of Legislative Affairs from the Kansas Department of Commerce. Rachel, welcome committee.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Rachel Willis. I'm Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Commerce, and it's my pleasure to provide you with an update about broadband. All right, so the state of Kansas and the federal government have made significant investments in broadband in the past few years to bring all Kansans access to affordable high-speed internet. So today, like I said, I'll provide you with an overview of our various broadband grant programs and our work that we're doing to ensure that Kansans are connected and ready to compete in the global economy. So here on this slide, you'll see our mission of the Office of Broadband. The Office of Broadband Development was established within the Department of Commerce in 2020 through an executive order by Governor Kelly. So the mission says that we're working to ensure Kansas can compete globally in a digital economy through access to high-speed, reliable internet. Currently, we administer 9 programs, totaling right at $661.9 million in anticipated investment, connecting 100,828 homes or businesses, all by FY 2026. So we have, like I said, 86 active projects with the earliest award beginning in 2022. So on the next slide, we'll talk about each of those programs. So here on this slide, we list out each of our programs and the total funding available within each of those programs. On the last column there, you'll also see whether that funding entity comes from the state, whether that investment was made at the state or federal level. We'll move on. Okay, so our first program that I'd like to talk about today is typically referred to as BAG, our Broadband Acceleration Grant. This program will invest about $85 million over the course of 10 years, again, bridging the broadband divide in Kansas. The funding is provided through the Ike Transportation Plan, and it is the first and only state-funded broadband grant program that we have here in Kansas. It's important to note that under BAG, the state initially allocated $5 million per year for the years 2021, 2022, and 2023, then followed by 7 years of investment at $10 million. To date, this program has connected a little more than 11,000 homes or businesses, again with a total investment of $56 million in state and matching funds. We'd also like just to interject here. So as I go through my slides and talk about each of the programs, I did deliver to the committee just this morning another document that lists out each of those grantees for the particular awards. So if you look at handout 2, it's just, yes, yep, that's it. So you'll see on that first page all of the awardees related to BAG. Okay. Next up is our Capital Project Fund for Infrastructure, or CFP. This program is an ongoing federal initiative under the American Rescue Plan Act, which made $10 billion available to states to fund capital projects. The priority of this program is to support broadband expansion to facilitate work, education, and healthcare in the areas that lack access to internet speeds of 100/20. Most notably, Commerce was one of the first 8 states in the country to receive these CPF dollars from the federal government, which allowed us to quickly make those awards and allow providers ample time to construct and deploy. A $83.5 million federal investment was combined with almost $42 million in matching funds to bring that total investment in broadband infrastructure to more than $125 million in this particular program. Commerce awarded 24 grants to 20 broadband providers, which will result in more than 24,500 homes and businesses being connected to high-speed broadband. Excitingly enough, 22 of those projects have completed construction, and all should be complete by June of this year, so June of 2025. We'll move on to our next program, which is LINK, our lasting infrastructure and network connectivity. This was created from a $30 million allocation from the Sparks Committee and using ARPA dollars. LINK provides a competitive infrastructure grants resulting in 10 projects, enabling locations with a minimum, again, of that 100/20 speeds to 1,984 homes, 487 businesses, and 27 community anchor institutions. So those community anchor institutions are places like schools, libraries, health clinics, and health centers. This funding also supported Kansas's first internet exchange point, or an IXP, facility in Wichita, and 1 middle-mile infrastructure project in Cloud and Republic counties to reduce the overall costs in delivering broadband to consumers. We anticipate the majority of these projects, again, to close out over the summer of 2025, so this summer. Okay, move on to our next program. So this is enabling the middle-mile broadband infrastructure. This is a collaboration with KDOT, CANRIN, and a private partner. This program aims to deploy 671 miles of open access middle-mile fiber network. Again, the project seeks to lower the cost for broadband construction, specifically in rural areas, connect to higher education and healthcare facilities, and to provide internet at lower costs to underserved areas. Kansas was awarded $42.5 million, placing it in the top 20% of grant awards for the nation. I'll show you on the next slide specifically about this project. The construction of this network will begin after the completion of a comprehensive environmental and historic preservation plan. It will be, again, located along KDOT's primary freight routes and provide connections to southwest and northeast Kansas. Move on to our next program. This is BEAD, our Broadband Equity Access and Deployment program. This was deployed under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Kansas was allocated $451.7 million in funding, again, to enhance broadband infrastructure, connecting those without access to broadband connection, again, at those minimum speeds of 100/20. So as part of a rigorous grant development process, Kansas had to submit several strategic planning documents along with location analysis to our federal partners for approval. Upon the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, so NTIA is what we typically refer to them as, approval using these federal maps and information for Kansas providers, Commerce developed a list of 52,343 homes and businesses deemed eligible for funding. Kansas's BEAD portal closed December 20th of 2024. There were 200 applications submitted, requesting right at $673 million with a proposed total project cost of $942 million. So well oversubscribed with our allocated amount of $451.7 million. So we are conducting an extensive review process for these applications, and we anticipate that the NTIA will approve our BEAD awardment recommendations between the second and third quarters of this year. And we're hopeful that construction will then begin with our providers by later this year, so late 2025 or early part of next year, 2026. Okay. We'll move on. So this particular program is our USDA Broadband Technical Assistance Grant. This grant is aimed at providing technical assistance to some of our most rural counties here in Kansas. This award allows us to facilitate pre-engineering design and cost studies to determine broadband build-out costs and current barriers to deployment. So Commerce, working with the rural utility service staff, partners with local governments to analyze these results of these studies, develop mitigation strategies, and really identify the next steps to effectively provide broadband in those specific areas. This grant, again, will help those communities understand and ultimately solve those broadband deployment issues. On the slide there, you will see the 6 counties that are specifically targeted with this grant. Okay, next up is DOC, our Digital Opportunities to Connect Kansans. This is a $5 million program created by the Spark Committee, again using ARPA dollars. This program supports digital skills training to expand opportunities in workforce and essential technology skills. So in 2024, we awarded 15 projects for nearly $2.6 million. We anticipate awarding the remaining funds in March of this year. So next up is ADOPT. This is Advancing Digital Opportunities to Promote Technology. So through the Capital Projects Fund program, again under ARPA, Commerce launched the Advancing Digital Opportunities to Promote Technology program. This is a $15 million program that supports projects that enable device distribution and public Wi-Fi in underserved and unserved communities. Just last year, so in 2024, we awarded 4 public Wi-Fi projects and 5 equipment distribution projects, totaling 3,106 devices that were distributed. The second round of ADOPT will close on February 5th, so coming up. Next up is DOORS. We really love our acronyms. So DOORS is developing online opportunities and ready skills from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. $8.2 million will be awarded to projects that support this particular program. The plan specifically outlines strategies and objectives to achieve its goals, including ensuring digital skills training, affordability support, and broadband-ready devices. Those are aligned, again, with our top priorities within our Kansas Digital Opportunity Strategic Plan. We will accept applications between February 3rd and April 3rd. So those wrap up our projects or our programs, right, the 9 programs. So I did want to spend just a minute talking a little bit about the future of broadband in Kansas. So again, our office is really focused on deploying high quality, reliable, and affordable broadband while also maximizing our state and federal investments. Kansas is better positioned to competitively compete in today's digital economy when we think about these things, right? So when we think about agriculture, so enhancing precision agriculture not only improves online cattle auctions and auto steering for GPS guided tractors, it also helps with soil data measurements, right? So all of those things can't be done without reliable high-speed internet. As we think about manufacturing, and specifically smart manufacturing, that's within our aerospace industry, right? And the recent creation of the smart factory there at Wichita State University. When we talk about workforce training, right, we're really thinking about attracting and retaining and upscaling our workforce, but we need to do that as we do those same things within broadband, right? We've got to have access, again, to high-speed internet. And then lastly, thinking about public safety. So modernizing and securing those public safety through maintaining and improving our network infrastructure for our first responders, right? Becomes very critical to them. So it's really about that fiber that powers those cell towers that are often used to triangulate public safety incidences. And as we think about some of our big events that are coming up, whether it be the World Cup or other things, this is going to be especially useful and critical to protecting our visitors and Kansans around those sorts of things. So here, as I get close to finishing up my presentation, we wanted to share a couple maps with you. The first is where we started in 2022. So this reflects Kansas's broadband access based on data from providers reporting to the FCC, which is how we work, right? So the red areas indicate homes and businesses lacking access to minimum speeds of 100 over 20. So this is a picture of the state in 2022. So all those red are areas that didn't have that access to that particular speed of internet. So then if we look at 2024, you can see our progress that we've made. So this is our current status. So this doesn't include any of our projections and thoughts and considerations for our BEAD funding, which will connect an additional 52,000 identified locations. This is just right now and the work that we've done. So providers continue to invest and build out or upgrade their existing networks. People move into houses and open businesses in locations that aren't on this list. So as communities continue to grow and talent returns, we're going to need to continue to provide more and better internet. This final map shows locations that will not be served by BEAD funding based on the latest FCC broadband map. So while federal funding will address many broadband gaps across the state, it, again, only reflects a moment in time. As Kansas continues to grow with more homes and businesses being developed, BEAD funding will not account for that future expansion, as well as miss addresses that the FCC just misses, right? So as we invest in our roads and bridges and utilities to connect and sustain our communities, we must prioritize broadband to ensure economic competitiveness, access to education, and public safety. When we think about water and public safety and the electric grid and other critical infrastructures, it's important to remember they're all supported by broadband. For our rural and underserved areas, broadband is a lifeline that enables those small businesses to grow, for agriculture to be more efficient, for families to connect, and communities to thrive. If we choose not to invest in it, we risk leaving entire communities behind, widening gaps in opportunities and economic mobility. Broadband infrastructure is not an investment in technology. It is an investment in the future of every Kansan. So today, every single federal dollar and state dollar we've received towards broadband infrastructure deployment can be associated with a specific address across the state, and yet we still have not connected all Kansans. New investments in broadband will be necessary well beyond today and tomorrow to ensure the future generations of Kansas can compete in the global economy. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Rachel. So do you have a total on how much has been invested so far?
Yes. So far, without the further investments from BAG, right, our state program through the Ike legislation, $661.9 million.
Okay. And how do these, is it local companies that apply for these grants or loans, or are they all just grants?
Yes, they're grants, and yes, it's providers that apply.
So how do they find out about this? How do they know that there's money out there for a program? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so they're thankfully paying attention to all the federal dollars and that being flown through our office. And then, of course, our office does lots of outreach and different promotions through our channels to make sure that folks know, that the providers know, that our chambers and our EcoDevo friends and local governments and schools are all aware of these opportunities.
So is there a process that you have where you try to distribute this in all areas of the state, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we'll send out a press release. We'll do social media blasts. We'll send it out through our listservs, whether that's specifically in the Office of Broadband Development or whether that's through the Office of Rural Prosperity, just our general kind of listserv. So yeah, we have lots of different means to do that. Then we'll typically hold different informational webinars and provide technical assistance throughout all of these processes, so folks understand the opportunity, they understand how to apply, and can ask questions.
Because when I look at the map, it looks like, that's why I was wondering if you try to target areas that, looks like southeast Kansas is probably one that's lagging behind the rest of the state. Is that because of the local providers hadn't started this earlier? Because I know in some areas, the local providers have been doing fiber for a long time before these programs ever started.
Yeah, so I think it's a variety of reasons, right? So I think it can be just expansion, right? So maybe there's new homes being built, new businesses. So what happens to build these maps out at the federal level, our providers have to communicate that to the FCC. And sometimes there's things that are just missed, and it just keeps getting updated and kind of grown out and expanded that way. Other reasons are sometimes for these locations, especially as we get closer and closer to universal access for broadband, some of these kind of final projects, if you will, are very expensive, right? To get that last mile, to get that particular home or business connected, and it's hard for a provider to pencil that out and make those numbers work. So some of these projects might just be a little bit more challenging. So we went after that low-hanging fruit at the beginning, if you will.
Sure. So do you use Starlink or any of the satellite services? Do you provide any of this for, like, some of these locations are probably very remote, and it's, run 10 miles of cable for one customer is not very efficient or economical.
Yeah, you're right. So we have to follow essentially the federal guidelines on almost all of this, and we get very little wiggle room as far as how we actually implement these things. So there's specific rules regarding fiber versus satellite, and that gets into the weeds. And if you want more information, I can have some of the real experts within the broadband team explain some of that.
Thank you. Other questions? Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. I'm not sure a page, but it's enabling middle mile broadband infrastructure. And we go to the map, and I see all these community colleges tied in, but I don't see Cali College tied into that. And then I think Senator Peck is going to ask the same thing about Montgomery County. Was there a reason why they were not involved?
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer to that. I can ask our interim director to step up and respond to that, or I can get that for you later. I'm sure there is a very specific reason for which ones were involved and which weren't. Yeah.
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, Kansas Office of Broadband Development, you said was initiated or developed through an EO. Is this office got a sunset going forward? I realize the benefit and value of establishing broadband statewide, but eventually that will happen. So when will the Office of Broadband Development sunset?
Yeah, Senator, that's a good question. I would have to go back to that specific executive order to see if it has a sunset. I'm not for sure. But I would argue that our work within the Office of Broadband will never be complete, right? We might have access, all Kansans might hopefully soon have access to reliable internet. But as technology continues to change, and as those speeds enhance, and us trying to stay current with those speeds and current with that technology, maybe as we move from fiber to satellite, that sort of stuff, there's always going to be a demand, and we should always look at this now as broadband truly being a utility, right? We wouldn't wouldn't say that our work with electricity or our work with the roads are complete, because we all have access to those. And broadband really is the same thing. We need it, in every component almost of our daily lives. So I don't see that our work within that office ever being complete. Our mission probably will change and evolve as we think about how best to improve and to grow that particular utility, if you will. But I don't think that our work will be done.
That's speculative, Mr. Chairman. So eventually, I would say that this could blend into commerce, reduce FTEs, maybe have a code sunset, something. I don't understand. I couldn't follow your numbers. The chair asked about the amount of money that has been invested so far. You said $661.9 million, which is on page 2. So then we see on about a couple pages further that in 2020, the state launched a 10-year program at $85 million. So I guess I'm not following the money on page 3. Then the federal money in round numbers is 530. So we have invested 600. We've actually spent or encumbered $662 million.
Yeah, good question. And it is a lot, and you get easily confused and lost in it. Believe me, it's taken me a long time to even be able to talk about it today. So on page 3, you're going to see these are essentially our total amounts of funding that the Office of Broadband is set to receive, right? So all of those federal dollars listed on page 3 are dollars that we have received and we're working to deploy, right? The $85 million, which is the Kansas investment in the IKE plan, that's the total amount that particular statute has said that the Office of Broadband should receive. The amounts that we've received so far for that program, because in the statute it has it on a scale, right? So we received $5 million in 2021, 2022, and 2023 under that BAG program. So that's $15 million out of that 85 we've received. Then we're going to receive for 7 years, we will receive $10 million. So that gets you all the way to that $85 million under BAG.
I understand that, but
Okay.
the $530 million that you list on page 3 is that says it's federal money. That's a round number, but that's federal money. And so that's been received, been expended. I'm curious as to if the money's sitting, drawing interest somewhere, if it's not encumbered, and that might be, Mr. Chairman, information for another time. But since this is the Ways and Means Committee, I'm focused on dollars.
Yes, Senator, yes. So of those dollars that you see on on page 3 of the federal dollars, I think that the total math, if I did my quick calculations, is $636.9 million. And the big one out of that, of course, is BEAD, which is Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment, which is that $451.7 million. That one, we've just closed the application period on December 20th, and we're reviewing those applications. And so those dollars will be allocated and awarded soon, with some of those projects then actually starting construction by the end of the year.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. When you talk fiber in the grant, what's the percentage of all this funding that actually has fiber in the grant?
I don't know that number. Okay. Yeah.
Who is the director of broadband?
So currently, right now, we have an interim director. We're still continuing to look for a broadband director for the office. The interim is Joseph Lee. Yes.
So you're there seeing that. I've been around here a little bit, and I'm impressed with what they're doing. The other thing I wanted to ask you, that when you get back to the page on this little meeting,
Yes.
on the last page under Doc 1, it says awarding Wichita State University County Butler, and it's got like $40 million. Wichita State's not in Butler that I know. I just wonder if you can explain what that is.
It's a good question. I don't know. I'll get back to you.
And if you look at
make that list, you might, it's got like the toolbox, 100,000, you got Goodwill Industries. Like there's some private industry. So I kind of want to make sure how's the private industry knows. Senator Petty.
Rachel, on that, were you going to respond?
Yeah, sorry, I was just thinking, and Senator Fagg, we'll get back to you with more details on that particular chart. So yes, my understanding, and I'm making a guess here, is that they're more nonprofits than private, but I'll get back to you for sure. Thank you.
Senator Petty.
Thank you. On the last map, the unserved locations, and I know the chair had asked earlier about how it looks like the southeast part of the state has more underserved, but I also noticed that, and you talked about the cost here, and when I was looking at this map, so am I reading this correctly, that those areas that are more economically distressed are also going to, they're having the hardest time getting the broadband expanded there? Is it because there's not the ability to make the local investment?
Yeah, this is Senator, that's a great point. And I do think that there is some alignment there with those economically stressed areas. I can't speak to much more than that, but we can dive into that and follow up.
Thank you.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Willis, for this presentation. It's been very helpful. I just have a question on I'm going to try to pronounce an acronym. IMBI?
Yes.
EMMBI?
Yep.
Who is the private industry partner that's associated with that?
Idea Tech.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you.
Next, we will have Corey Davis, Director of Division of Multimodal Transportation and Innovation, Kansas Department of Transportation. Corey, welcome committee.
Good morning, Chairman and committee members. I'll have my presentation pulled up, please. All right. My name is Corey Davis, Director of Multimodal Transportation and Innovation for KDOT. I'm happy to stand before you to provide an update on KDOT's broadband initiatives. So I'd like to briefly outline the inclusion of broadband and transportation technologies in the 10-year IKE transportation program. During the adoption of IKE, it was realized that both broadband expansion and preparing for the future of transportation technology were very important for the future of Kansas. So we have two distinct programs that you can see on the screen and in the presentation. We have a $100 million pot of funding through our Preservation Plus program, and this is to install conduit and fiber in our right-of-way. This has benefits for both transportation use and broadband expansion. And also listed is the Broadband Acceleration Grant, which Rachel just mentioned in detail. So we view the $100 million in Preservation Plus as more of a long-haul type network to support broadband expansion, and the Broadband Acceleration Grants as that last mile connection. So what is it we're doing at KDOT? To provide a little more detail, we're installing 7-way microduct with that $100 million. And we really view our right-of-way as a real asset for expanding broadband and expanding transportation technologies. The 7-way microduct provides opportunity for both expanding transportation technologies, but also broadband expansion. We plan to use this 7-way microduct. We'll be using 2 of the microducts within that to expand intelligent transportation systems and set ourselves up for the future of transportation and connected vehicle technologies. The other 5 will be made available to support internet service providers in expanding broadband. So where are we putting this infrastructure? We are currently prioritizing our freight routes of significance. These are generally our higher volume routes, and transportation technology we can leverage will support more efficient freight movements throughout the state. You can see a lot of key east-west and north-south corridors that carry Kansas freight on a daily basis. Also listed on the map on the southern portion of the state and the eastern portion of the state is the Middle Mile program that was mentioned in Rachel's presentation. We are a key partner in that process. I'd like to point out that these funds have been programmed all the way through 2029. So almost through the end of Ike, we have projects programmed, and there's 16 of these, either in design, under construction, or in the planning process. A little more about our partnership with Commerce. We have a great partnership with Commerce, both in the Broadband Acceleration Grant Program and the Middle Mile Project. Super excited about the Middle Mile Project. We were able to leverage $26 million of state funds out of that $100 million pot I mentioned earlier to receive an additional $43 million in funding. This middle mile network can provide that long-haul network to help assist in that last mile connection through broadband acceleration grants and the other programs that Rachel had mentioned. This additional funding has allowed KDOT to invest in substantially more miles of conduit than originally the $100 million would allow. Other initiatives going on with broadband at KDOT is our Dig Once strategy. This strategy under development will allow for a much more efficiency in the placement of conduit and fiber for broadband. It will provide transparency in where we and our internet service provider partners are placing fiber, which will allow for future partnerships to share costs or share trenches for the more efficient placement of these valuable assets. Ultimately, it allows us to more effectively use KDOT right-of-way as we advance these initiatives. Earlier, I mentioned transportation benefits, so I wanted to briefly describe what that may look like. As we advance towards a more connected transportation system, we will have the opportunity to leverage these fiber assets to provide intelligent transportation solutions, real-time alerts to your vehicles, dynamic messaging signs along our roadways, safety improvements along our entire network. This is already happening across our state where we currently have this fiber, and this program will look to expand those opportunities. This will also set Kansas up for the future of connected vehicle and those opportunities that will exist. This can provide KDOT with the data that can help support decision-making. We can more accurately understand what is happening on our roadways and make more informed decisions. An example of this would be if we have connected vehicle data coming to KDOT, and we see a segment of roadway that is consistently showing harsh braking or lane departure, we can immediately address that issue, whether it's signage or roadway improvements, and make these decisions in real time. Ultimately, our goal is to set up Kansas for the future of transportation and expand broadband, all while leveraging our existing asset, which is our right-of-way, and then by adding one piece of additional infrastructure in that conduit. With that, I'll gladly stand for any questions.
Thank you, Corey. How many miles of conduit have you installed?
We have north of 150 miles currently. We're going to be updating that number soon. And then the middle mile program will add another 600 miles.
600 miles?
Yeah.
Okay. Questions? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. When I looked at this first sheet, and this is a one-on-one question for me, when Ike was set up, did this allow for other programs other than highways? Because I always thought Ike was highways. There's 100 million here and 85, so there's 185 million. That's one question. The other one is that borrowed money or is that money we got in the bank that went out in that 185?
Okay, Senator, to your first question, there are several other different programs within Ike. There's multimodal programs for transit, bike ped, aviation. It's not just highways and bridges. So there are multiple different programs within Ike when it was passed. To your second question, that is a part of the Ike program. That is budgeted dollars.
Right, so is that borrowed money, that 185 million, did we borrow that? Was that in a loan somewhere, or was that money we just had in the bank that went out?
I'll turn to my colleague Joel to.
Good morning, Senator Joel Skelly, Director of Policy for KDOT. That's not borrowed money. That's actually coming from revenues in the State Highway Fund annually. That's why these projects are all programmed out. So that as we receive funds from the state motor fuels tax, from those revenue sources that come into the State Highway Fund, they are then put forward for expenditures, just like all of our other highway projects. So it is not borrowed money. It's actually money that is coming into the Highway Fund annually.
So what kind of balance we got in that account now?
I can find that out for you. I don't know that we necessarily carry a balance. What we do is we have that funding coming in, and then for all the funding that comes in, we actually then plan out projects that then commit to that funding. So we're constantly working through, as we have funding estimates that come from the consensus revenue estimating group. As we see those funds come in, we know about where we're going to be at. So there's where we start programming out our projects through the IKE program, through our local consultation process. I know the local consultation process, I think for several of you is familiar, but we do every 2 years come out across the state to talk about projects that we may need to start looking at putting into development or constructing in the future, near future, long-term future. So we are constantly planning out projects based on the needs that are out there as well as the funding that we have that's coming in.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Corey. Appreciate you being here today. Next, we'll have Megan Bottenberg, Director of Government Affairs for Cox Communication. Megan, welcome to committee.
And Happy New Year. I'm Megan Bottenberg. I am the Director of Government Affairs for Cox Communications here in Kansas. Being our first time for you today, we wanted to just really kind of set the stage. Cox serves 119 communities throughout the entire state of Kansas. We serve some of the largest communities, Wichita, some of your communities that you live in. We also serve some of the smallest communities like Gass, Kansas, and soon we'll be serving Delia, Kansas, which is here in Shawnee County, so we are excited about that. Rural, urban, for Garden City to Pittsburgh, from our Kansas City to Salina and Topeka as well. So wide range, and I believe about 10,000 miles of fiber throughout the entire state. In the past 5 years, we have expanded our footprint from 92 communities in 2020 to 119 today, as I stated, and largely that's through our own private dollar investment in the state. Because we know how important it is for unserved and underserved Kansas to have access to broadband. Big and multi-gig speeds, and we share the same commitment that Department of Commerce has. We know how important broadband is to our communities and to your constituents. And again, we've also upgraded our current infrastructure, all at the same time as we're building out to almost 20 new communities, 30 communities. We upgraded our own infrastructure with our own private dollars to ensure that every Cox community has a fiber-powered network with multi-gig speeds here in Topeka and in all of your communities. We're also grateful to be a recipient of the Capital Projects Fund. We are nearing completion of that project later this spring. Like I said, in Shawnee County, Jackson County, and Williamson County. That's 1,300 homes nearly, and installations have already begun. Residents are already starting to see the benefits of broadband, and we are excited about that completion nearing. Over the past 5 years, we have worked with the Kansas Office of Broadband Development and the Department of Commerce intensely. And
coming up. My apologies. Starting over. When we asked them for additional feedback, they said, you need more localism, more co-investments, more in-kind contributions. Even though on those interview calls, we had community representatives, including a legislator, on the interview call, and the county willing to provide a co-investment and in-kind contributions. The denial and the feedback is frustrating and disappointing, even for those community members engaged. If we had known that they wanted a certain number of community members and organizations involved, or a certain dollar amount of co-investment or in-kind contributions, we would have worked with our partners to provide that. But again, we have no information. We don't know how the applications are going to be scored. In one recent grant webinar, the percentage of scoring was broken down by only percentage of financial and technical aspects of the application. When I asked if they would make that public, the actual point system and the specific criteria, KOBD stated, the specific points are not available, only the percentages. Again, how do you submit an application if you don't know the categories and the scoring point system available? This demonstrates a lack of transparency of how these applications are measured and determined at the end of the day what is best for Kansans. If you look at any best practice research of a grant review system, it says you need to have a clear point system with categories so that everyone and all stakeholders have clear understanding of what the grant is, how it's designed, how you apply for it, and to ensure that the dollars are being used effectively with clear objectivity in the process. Cox has raised these concerns many times with KOBD. And as recently as November at that grant webinar, the transparency has not improved. We hope this can be addressed in the future because like you, we want this to be successful. We want them to be successful. We want every Kansan to have broadband. And we have been there from the beginning with our own private dollars to do it, and we will continue trying to work with the office to do it as well. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Megan. Questions? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Megan, thank you for your presentation. I'm sitting here thinking in the spirit of transparency, I would think all applications should be available after awards given. I think that helps people knowing and going to the next one. I could say except for business information, on Cox, at the actual award, so I hear what you're saying, and hopefully that's something they can discuss, and in the spirit of transparency, that should happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You may not want to answer this, but is there a feel among stakeholders that the Kansas Office of Broadband Development may have favorite or good old boy relationships with some? If Cox is well-known, well-respected, a big company, willing to work hard to earn their dollars. If you guys have been denied, somebody's been getting something. Do you want to answer that, or do you just want?
I can only speak for Cox, and I can say if you look at the grant awards, that pretty clearly tells the story. But I think most importantly, you don't know if there's favorites being played or a network being played when you don't have the transparency in front of you. When all I get is the feedback of you need more localism, you need more co-investment, in-kind contributions, and I've given that to you on an interview, and I'm still being denied, and I can't see why I've been denied, and they say that that information is for internal purposes, no one really knows if the process is objective.
I appreciate your willingness to share, and that goes back, Mr. Chairman, to what I asked about having a sunset. If there's a sunset, at least there's the legislature's looking at it closer. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much, Megan, for being here and for the presentation. So KOBD provided the committee with maps showing broadband coverage and how that's changed over the last couple of years. You mentioned in your testimony that there are areas that have been overbuilt. Can you provide us that? And also, if those areas had not been overbuilt, how much more could have been covered? Is that something that we can get, Mr.
I
Chair?
would be happy to provide you the exact details after the hearing. I can tell you in 2 instances, Cox was overbuilt in the city of Wichita. So we already provide multi-gig speeds. A grant award was provided to a provider to overbuild Cox in the city limits of Wichita. Another cable provider in Eureka Springs, I believe is where it was, they were also overbuilt. Mediacom was also overbuilt by another grant award as well.
Thank you. And if those overbuilds had not happened, how much more could we have covered? I'd be interested in knowing that if that's possible. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Happy to provide you with that.
Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Megan. My question may be, I may not know enough about the overbuilt situation, but let's assume that, and I'm going to use my community of Winfield, we have cable in Winfield today. We have fiber in Winfield today. If another provider comes in, do they use the same fiber? Or, I mean, you got one strand of fiber going through there. Is that, when you say overbuilt, are they adding another strand of fiber?
That is correct.
So we're duplicating efforts, and if what I understand from your testimony, we're duplicating efforts in some areas. That goes back to what somebody used to say, that when we have a buffet, let's make sure everybody gets served before they go back for seconds. And I think that's what we're doing here, if I understand that.
And Mr. Chairman, if I can expand on that for a moment, and that's exactly, Senator, what has happened in those 2 instances. So, for instance, Cox has their own fiber line, their own line there in the right-of-way. The grant money has been given to another provider to lay another fiber line in that same right-of-way. I will also say, and that's, again, 2 documented instances of that, and I can get you those dollar amounts. In one instance on this actual capital projects fund, that we were a recipient of in Shawnee County, Jackson counties, and Wabaunsee County, during the construction process, we learned that another company, a rural telephone company, they used their own private dollars to build into one of the communities that we were slated to build in the grant. And Cox said, wait, the principle is, and the whole reason why we have this grant funding is to provide broadband to unserved communities. And here's a company that used their own private dollars to build that community. And we went to KOBD and said, we need to remove that community off of our grant because now they're served. And again, it goes against the principle that the grants are being used for. And so we did remove that community because, again, that private investment was made, and we didn't want to overbuild another company in the same way we've been overbuilt.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Megan. Appreciate you being here today, and thanks for the information. Next, we'll have Eric Santoris, Executive Director of Communications Coalition of Kansas. Eric, welcome committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Are we on? Did I hit the right button or the wrong button? Okay. First time up this year and technologically challenged. So I don't put your fiber in the ground. I've gotten to try a fiber splicing thing. You don't want me anywhere near getting between you and your broadband. So good morning, Mr. Chairman. I am Eric Sartorius, Executive Director of the Communications Coalition of Kansas, and we are the rural broadband companies of Kansas. Thinking back 100 years ago, we were the rural telephone companies that served every little city from here to there, and we continue to do so. And now broadband is the name of the game and the expectation. So many of our members are multi-generational. Some are companies, some are cooperatives. We have some cooperatives, so we kind of have a mixed bag of everything. I will try and not touch on things that you all have already had discussed and make sure there's time for questions. You've already heard from KDOT and KOBD about a lot of the grant programs, so I won't delve into those or how those have proceeded, but I would want to stress that in all of those programs, there is a private investment component to it. In the broadband acceleration grants that are through the IKE program, that's a 50-50 match. So if a recipient receives a grant award, they are matching that investment in building those. While grant funding has been significant, you all have heard those figures, I also wanted to point out that that's not the only thing that's occurring. There is a lot of private investment, and Ms. Bogdenberg touched on what Cox has been doing. Surveying our members over the past several years, they've been averaging about $200 million in private investment on an annual basis, and that's absent the matching funds that they've put in for any grants. So it's grant funding plus approximately $200 million each year across the state of Kansas that our members have been putting in. With respect to KOBD, I'll certainly leave it up to you all in terms of how long it should exist and where it should exist and how broadband should be overseen. But our relationship with KOBD, I feel, has been pretty strong. They have been a willing partner. They have been willing to sit down and discuss things. One of the things that industry talked to them about with all these programs going on, can we have more frequent updates on things? Stuff is moving so quickly. They did establish biweekly calls that any industry or private person could join to hear what's going on, when they're holding webinars, what the deadlines are. Particularly as we led up to the deadline on BEAD, they were having calls talking about updates and frequently asked questions. But then kind of echoing Cox's testimony, all relationships have a little friction to them. And I would reiterate what Megan shared. Earlier on, KOBD was much more willing and forthcoming with sitting down and walking you through not just why you maybe didn't get a grant, but some specific, the folks that finished ahead of you, here's what really stuck out to us and is really what we're looking for. And that's very positive feedback. And again, in terms of transparency and a level playing field, knowing what the entity awarding grants is looking for is fair to everybody. It shouldn't just happen to be that one of our companies happened to visit with them and heard what was good, but Cox didn't get to have that same information. It should be very broad-based and very open. You've heard from Commerce about the BEAD program and the applications that came in. I wanted to touch just a little bit on some of the headwinds with that program. About 1/3 of our members wound up applying for BEAD. About another third really looked at the program, and what stuck out in my conversations with them are a few things. One, the pre-application that was intended to meet the federal requirements was over 150 questions long. And each of those questions were not yes, no kind of questions. It's like, give us your last 4 years of financial, I'm making this up, but they were very in-depth questions. The second piece, and again, this is not a reflection of KOBD, this is the federal program, federal procurement, federal reporting, Build America, Buy America, Davis-Bacon, everything that layers on costs. Looking at those, some of my members said we estimated it would tack on 30% to the cost of doing a project. And then if they got that far along, then you have to realize that under the current law, grant funds are treated as regular income. So they'd be paying income tax on the grants. So money comes from the government to build things, but first the government says, first you got to give some of it back to us so you can build less of something. And that has been a barrier. In terms of general building and broadband, I'd like to touch on two things that are barriers, and that's something that the federal law has touched on. Broadband and KDOT ask us, what is making it challenging at times to get projects done? One barrier, quite honestly, for us is working with railroads. I had one of our providers down in Southeast Kansas, actually. It took over 5 months for them to get signed off to access the railroad right-of-way. And what was even more curious in that instance was they didn't really need the railroad right-of-way. They were putting in fiber along a county road. The county road went under the railroad bridge. So we're not touching anything. We are going under 5+ months to get that done. Another one of our members is working on a project, north central, northeast Kansas. So far, over $100,000 in costs in that project to access railroad right-of-way. The second thing I want to kind of put on your list of things to be thinking about, KDOT kind of touched on it. They're underway with an initiative to review their access policy for right-of-way. We feel that policy is long overdue. They've engaged stakeholders in this, and we're anxiously awaiting a draft policy, which I hope is coming in the near future. It's imperative that that policy, when adopted, results in a competitively neutral access for people into the right-of-way and does not create an environment where one broadband provider or another is afforded special status or extra status. I know that there have been folks in multiple industries that have been a little concerned that in some of these projects, one of the things that is allowed is that the entity constructing a project on behalf of KDOT is afforded the ability to put their own conduit and then their own fiber in as they're building KDOT's project, which I think creates a real concern for all providers that if we're paying to put our stuff in the ground and someone else is not only getting paid to do KDOT's work, but is also getting allowed to put their own stuff in while the hole is open, that's a little concerning. And I don't care if that is one of our competitors or if it's one of our members. I don't think it would be fair if one of our members had that ability to put something in at minimal cost. So that's one thing for us to work out. Other than that, I would stand for questions. I know Commerce touched on it, and it kind of got to the question of how long KOBD should be around. These really are like your electric grids and your natural gas lines and your roads. We can get them up to a good shape, but you can't just walk away from them forever. Our members add the fiber. You don't have to replace the fiber too much, but it's the components on either end that increase the speed, allow more clarity, less latency, and things like that. There's always going to be a need to invest in that, whether it's the state and private, we shall see, but I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Eric. Questions? Don't see any, so thank you for being here today. Appreciate it. Committee, that completes our work for today, so we are adjourned.